So one of the places where people really get stuck in their recovery process is in their identity. Super easy example. I'm mixed black and Jewish, and I used to keep my hair really short, like a little tight fade, because I wanted to fit in with the black crowd that I was hanging out with. And when I first got sober, I was like, oh, I'm gonna grow my hair out. But my hair is, I have these like Jewish curly locks, you know? So I would start to grow it out. I would feel less black, less tough, and then I would immediately cut it. And I was really stuck in who I thought I should be in terms of how I thought about myself. My hair was like a metaphor for that. So for years in my early recovery, I would try to grow my hair out, and then I would feel softer, I'd feel different, or it wouldn't feel like me, and I would cut it again. And then I remember really like setting myself free at around 4 or 5 years sober, and I was like, I have to break out of this identity. I'm trapped in this hip hop, cool, tough way of being. And if I really want to be free, I have to let go of that. And I remember I started growing my hair longer and longer and longer until it was just like this, And for me, it was really a symbol of letting go of one identity and embracing whatever I was becoming. And that's a huge struggle in recovery. One of the ways that that's challenged kind of right up front, if somebody's at a 12-step meeting and you're sitting there and people are identifying, and somebody will nudge you with their elbow as they're identifying and say, are there any alcoholics in the room? And you're supposed to kind of raise your hand. You don't have to, but it's culturally normative. You're supposed to raise your hand and say, hi, my name is Shai, I'm an alcoholic. And if you haven't seen yourself in that way, it really kind of puts you off, and you're like, God, I don't want to, is that me? I'm not sure, et cetera, et cetera. There are all kinds of problems with labeling yourself. But one of the things that it does do is it can cause you to question the identity that you're trapped in. Part of the reason why you feel stuck in addiction and even in early sobriety is because you're trapped in the idea of who you think you should be, as opposed to allowing yourself to become who you are. And that has to do with letting go of identity. It doesn't mean you have to take on the label of alcoholic. That's a personal choice. It depends on how you relate to that idea. But it does mean that your identity has to change. If my identity doesn't change, how I see myself, how am I going to make the deep kind of transformation that I need to make in order to sustain recovery and live a fulfilling life? How can I go from being a pessimist to an optimist? How can I go from being depressed to being happy? How can I go from being anxious to being calm without letting go of how I see myself? And that's a very kind of sacred process that needs to be held. And it's not something that happens in 30 days. It's not something that happens in a couple months. It's something that we work at. It's a developmental shift that happens over the course of years. I call it developing a recovery identity. It doesn't have to be somebody else's definition of what it means to be a person in recovery, but you do have to have some definition of what it means for you to be in recovery, and you have to identify that with who you are. So when I think about myself as a husband, as a hip-hop MC, as a leader in an organization, as a father, and as a person in recovery. Now what that means, I could talk about that forever, but I identify as a person in recovery because that's part of who I am, it's part of my story, it's part of why I'm here right now. Thank you.